What should or shouldn't you do if your husband gives you expired food, if your mother-in-law wants to watch your baby's first bath, and your partner is in pain from a vasectomy? And a few other juicy ones in there. Our first story of the day is titled, "My husband gave me expired food," with about 1,000,000 exclamation marks at the end of it. She says, "What the hell? I'm so furious right now, and I am so terrified something could be wrong with my baby. He grilled food and gave me a hamburger bun that expires in 4 days. And of course, Google is freaking me out because my bun had a small green moldy spot on it. Has this happened to any of you? I'm freaking out and don't want to look at his face. I don't know why he did this when he just bought new buns. He said he wanted to get rid of the bread that would expire soon. Then why did you buy new buns? What should I do?" Clearly, the answer to what you should do under this circumstance is wait a bit until you eat the whole burger, then go on the internet, write an angry thread out into the world, wait to see what people tell you to do, then run into the bathroom, make yourself sick, and then you're good again. Obviously, that was sarcastic. This is one of those cases where the sheer amount of anxiety, and I kind of get it, it's indicative very much of the anxiety that people are under when they're pregnant, when it comes to eating and just food control in general. And yes, it is true that there are a couple of foodborne pathogens and bacteria that if you were exposed to while you were pregnant, something could happen to your baby. So I'm not saying that there is zero risk of that. I'm only saying that this is an extreme overreaction to something very small. And the point of, I had a small green moldy spot on it. Like you can take out the moldy spot. You can decide not to eat it if you notice that there's something off with it. If you like taste it and you're like, nah, I'm not feeling this. I think that there might be something off here. You don't have to eat it. The level of anger that she seems to have and the way that she delved right into this kind of terror for her baby is quite sad to me. Under these circumstances, you can say, hey, it's great that her husband prepared food for her. She should be grateful that she has that she got prepared food, that she didn't have to work for it, that she didn't have to do anything for it. And the vitriol, I'm freaking out and don't want to look at his face, as if he intentionally tried to poison her or poison their baby, is just really unfortunate. So it's funny on the one hand and very sad on the other hand. That's how I read this one. I'll read a couple of the comments out for you, which may let you regain your faith in humanity a little bit. One person says, "Did you eat the moldy spot? I'm so confused. Don't eat the mold and you'd be fine, I imagine. If the expiration date, which isn't even a hard rule, was in 4 days, why would your husband know to not feed it to you? Seems like an honest mistake and one you wouldn't be mad at him about." And OP replies, "It was just a silly thing happening. I didn't eat the moldy spot, as far as I know. When I saw it, I stopped. I was irritated because he didn't give me the new buns that he bought, and instead he gave me the almost expired ones." This is actually something that I do quite often in terms of, I'd say it's just how I was raised. You try to eat the stuff that you expect to go off before you eat the stuff that you just bought new. My husband doesn't relate to it. My husband would do the opposite and always eat the freshest food that you have first. But I think it's a very normal difference that can happen to people. I find it really sad that she seems to assume that he did it intentionally, or that there's a I guess carelessness. Maybe the argument is that there's a certain element of carelessness here, but I suspect that he just thought, hey, we have a bun, and then he just gave her a bun. And it's such a small situation, a day-to-day kind of thing that could happen to anyone, that I find it really sad that she made such a big deal out of it. Next person says, "First thing I thought was, at least he made you food. Seriously. Even if you ate the moldy spot, you're fine. Don't stress over small stuff unless you're sick or in pain. Stress is more of a problem than a little mold." And then she says, "Yeah, I love the days he cooks, but I do have to make sure things are done correctly." There's really something about her attitude and the way that she expresses herself that just doesn't speak to me at all, that I find kind of not a person that I would really want to interact with a lot. I'm glad that there are other people here saying, hey, maybe you should just be a little bit grateful that he made you some food and then just not stress out about it. In general, the amount of stress that people are under when they eat something or are exposed to something or breathe something where they're like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. In general, babies are pretty durable, bodies are pretty durable. You can get through quite a lot of stuff. You can make it through actual full-blown food poisoning and still be fine with your baby, Not that I'm saying that you should aim to get food poisoning, obviously not, but the immediate assumption of, oh, okay, if I eat something off, then everything's going to go down the drain is not a good one. The next person says, do you think he purposely gave you a bun with a small mold spot on it? If I were to take a wild guess, I would say he didn't see it and didn't want to waste food if it wasn't expired yet. And then she's like, no, I don't think he did it on purpose, but being a pregnant woman, I would appreciate fresh food at all times, especially when he bought fresh buns. I take fresh food over almost expired food any day, which is fair enough. Maybe this is just a quick conversation that you can have with your husband where you say, hey, if we have fresh food available, please let's go for that one first. And then if we still eat the other stuff, then it's fine. If not, then we throw it away and that's completely fine. This is not a thing that you need to argue about or debate about or have a fight over. You can just say that. It's not a big deal. And then the next person says, is this for real? Which was about my first response as well. And she said it was very real in that moment. And the next person, another person replies, pregnancy rage. So yes, maybe a little bit of the freak out is just hormonal. Maybe this is just part of the process that pregnant women go through. I didn't experience much pregnancy rage, to be honest, but I guess a lot of other people do, and I think it's a normal symptom for some people when it comes to pregnancy. So maybe the focus should be just on learning to calm down and not stress out. Our next thread of the day is titled, Mother-in-law sent aggressive text about not being present for baby's first at-home bath. Which also sounds unbelievably ridiculous, but let's read it first. So we were going to give our daughter a bath tonight, and his mom wanted to be here for it. And he told her yes, and I said no, because I want her first bath at home to be with just us, and his mom can come to the second bath, but we can send pics, if anything. So he told her that he wanted to bathe her as new parents together, but he feels bad because she was excited and thought she would be present for it. She sent him an aggressive text back saying how it's her only grandchild and she wanted to be there. So my husband's going to call her tomorrow and let her know she can't just come over whenever and that it's not just his child and that he's ultimately going to listen to me. How have you all set boundaries? What's really funny about this one, like in general, I don't get the thing with first baths at all. I think that as a parent, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking if it's the very first time you've bathed an infant, just because you're not sure how to hold them and you're worried about dropping them. But for anyone else, it's not an event. It's not an occasion. It's not something that people need to attend. It's not something that anyone outside the parents needs to watch. It's not entertainment. I don't quite understand the whole obsession with it as a thing in general. The other part to this one that's kind of sad is that the lack of communication, I guess, or cohesion between the married couple here. So in general, the dad is like, yeah, sure, you can come over and watch it. And the mom is like, no, that's weird. Why would we do that? I think that it is weird. I find it a little bit strange that the dad is like, yeah, sure, come over. It's like watching TV. I don't think that's how bathing babies works. It's just one of the things that you do for your child to keep them clean, in the same way that you change diapers, in the same way that you feed them. So you're looking after their day-to-day needs and making sure that they're met, making sure that they're comfortable, making sure that they're happy and warm and fed, and they don't need anything else. That's all there is to it. As far as I'm concerned, these are primarily parental activities. Like that's, the parents should be the people doing that. If you want other people in your family to bathe your kids, you can have them bathe your kids. But this attitude of like, okay, maybe she can come to the second bath because I want us to experience the first bath as parents together. And then she can come to the second one. And I think you're still turning your kid into a kind of spectacle for other people to watch and for yourself to watch as well. Like it's a little bit strange to me. So that's how I feel about it in general. The really sad part of this response she sent an aggressive text back saying how it's her only grandchild and she wanted to be there. She's not entitled to be there. Number one, she's not entitled to be there for any event that the baby actually goes through. Like that's not how that works. And number two, the fact that she feels aggressive in response to that is kind of also a little bit dodgy to me, because if we were to say no to my parents-in-law about anything, they would kind of just say, okay, cool, and back down. And that says to me that you do need to be a lot clearer in terms of setting boundaries and making it obvious that some things are okay and some things are not, but that generally your kids are your domain and that you have control over what you allow and what you don't allow. And then she says at the very end, DH is going to call, like her husband's going to call her tomorrow and let her know that she can't just come over whenever and that it's not just his child and he's ultimately going to listen to me. And in terms of how that comes across to a mother, I would probably say if my kid, was married and he said to me, hey, I feel bad for you, I would be okay with it, but my wife doesn't want to let me, that sends a really iffy message in terms of the dynamic of your relationships and who's making decisions and why you're making decisions. It makes it clear that your husband, or the husband in this case, is not actually on your side. He's just going along with it because he thinks that it's less conflict, because he just thinks it'll be less painful for him to just let you have your way. Under normal circumstances, if I were the husband, I would just be like, no, that's a bit strange. We're just going to bathe him. It's going to be fine. You can bond with him and spend time with the baby doing other things. Like the baby's going to be here for a very long time, fully. There's lots of other activities you could be doing with that baby that aren't watching him be washed. So I would say, the husband here is responsible for talking to his mother and explaining to her that baths are not events, that you need to invite people to, and she can do something else with the baby at whatever other time she wants. She can play with him, she can hold him, she can take pictures with him, all the things that you could otherwise do with a baby. When they're very, very newborn, you can't do very much because they sleep a lot. So, maybe she's a little bit impatient, but that's a conversation that you can have as well. It's not a big deal. That's how I would approach this situation. Now you can see the responses. First person says, okay, first of all, she's wacky. I don't know her, and she's definitely wacky, but she's definitely wacky because this isn't a normal let's invite family to type of thing. It's intimate, and of course, a big deal for the parents. I would just be like, this isn't something that I want to include other people in. Baby's first bath is an intimate thing. In fact, any bath is baby's private time. Baby deserves privacy. Then just invite her to do something else instead. Now you'll see, I don't actually agree. Like, I agree with the fundamental point of this comment, which is it's a little bit strange that she wants to be there. Say no. But the rest of it, it's a big deal for the parents. Like, it's just a bath, guys. It's just a bath. I don't understand why it's such a big deal. And the entire reasoning for it of saying, hey, baby's first bath is an intimate thing. Any bath is baby's private time and baby deserves privacy. I know that people perceive there to be different, people set their boundaries in different places, and that's totally fair. But for example, I would not have a problem with my mother-in-law changing a diaper. I don't think that there is an element there of saying, hey, baby should never be naked around anyone. My little brother, when he was very young, would just strip his clothes off and just run around the house because that's how he felt like behaving as a 2-year-old. And so the element of, hey, baby deserves privacy, it's a really intimate occasion. Like, I really don't think that that's the case. I honestly believe it's just one of those things that you do on a day-to-day basis to look after your baby. And it's just not a big deal. But, lots of people don't agree with me because baths are very, very, very special. You'll see how one person replies to that comment and says, I don't even change baby in front of anyone, not even her older brother. She definitely deserves privacy. I don't know why we've developed this habit or this idea that babies should be like hidden and kept behind closed doors. And if you want to interact with them in certain ways, like the number of diapers you have to change in a day, if every single time you have to change a diaper, you just take the baby and go somewhere into a separate room. Or if every time you have to breastfeed a baby, you go somewhere to a separate room. I find that it's as if you don't accept and involve the babies in your day-to-day life, which is sad. And then the next comment says, "What? That is such a weird request. I would never expect to be invited to watch someone else give their baby a bath. I would not allow that. She'll probably try to take over. Also, I would have your husband frame it as a team decision. If it sounds like you told him no, even though he wanted his mum there, she'll probably be even more hostile towards you." I agree 100% with that. DH has to watch his wording, because what you typed comes off as, well, OP doesn't want you involved and I am whipped. Yes, unfortunately for her husband, that is exactly how it comes across. And then she says, "I would have him say instead, firsts are reserved for the parents. As parents, we want to experience all of our baby's firsts. Please do not expect to be included in firsts and milestones." And I think that's a little bit sad as a general statement. Like I wouldn't communicate in that way. I find that it's as if you're trying to be a little bit confrontational, and it's not quite necessary. But, I guess if that's the kind of communication that your mother-in-law is most likely to respond to, you can go for it. In general, I do think that the obsession with first, if you call it that, comes from this place of people are nostalgic about different parts of their experience when they were parents as well. And so maybe for her, bathing was like one of the most fun parts of hanging out with her child and looking after her child. And she kind of wants to try to experience that again. So maybe we can come at it from a little place of compassion and explain, hey, we get that you want to be included. We get that you want to have a really close relationship with our child. We will try to enable you to have a good relationship with him as much as possible, just not in these kinds of areas, because these are areas that we don't want the kid to also feel like he's just being watched when he's doing things in general, right? Like that's not a way that you would interact with people. And if it were an adult or a slightly older child, you would notice how weird it is if there are multiple people around you watching you bathe, right? That's a little bit of a strange behavior. But then just give her other options and other ways of bonding with her grandchild instead. The next one is titled "Partner Got a Vasectomy." And this is a little bit unexpected. Like the actual content is not quite what you would expect from that title. I'm going to skip the first bit because she edits the post based on the comments that she gets. And then she said, like, she opened the thread with, "His procedure was Tuesday. While I'm very thankful he got it, so I don't have to go back in contraception, and we are absolutely done having kids, he's really been milking it. Every time he stands up, sits down, walks more than 5 steps, he grunts and or moans or does this, the of pain. And I'm just sitting here like, a week after having our youngest in February, I was taking him to doctor's appointments left and right, handling both him and our toddler, all while still actively bleeding and feeling sore, trying to breastfeed and waking up at night to feed. But I never made as much fuss as he is right now. He got the majority of the day away from the children. I have yet to have more than 2 hours away from either of our children since our daughter was born in 2020. And this thread was posted for reference in 2022. A month after she was born, he went to visit friends one day and overnight until I could go down 2 days later. He goes into the office several days a week. He grocery shops alone Saturday mornings. He gets time to rest, but I don't. I haven't averaged more than 4 hours sleep per night since a month before our son was born. He gets at least 6 hours every night. I did bring it up at one point when he showed me that it was bruised down there, and I was like, "Aw, that's no fun. But also, look at our son's head and be happy you didn't have to push that out." That's all I'm saying. It really does seem like man flu, but like man postpartum. And then she has a laughing emoji. I find this thread so utterly sad on every level. On every level. I think that there's a certain amount of just complete lack of compassion and lack of understanding towards her husband. I think that you don't need to compare the pain that you go through while giving birth to any other pain that any other person experiences for anything else. I think it's completely legit to say, okay, you know what, birth is kind of a unique experience, and nothing a man goes through will be able to compare to it, even like it's not about gradations of pain. It's a very, it's just the whole experience is so much more than the pain of it as well. So you can't really sit there and go, okay, you didn't go through what I went through. There's this element of trying to like it's a competition, like I was in more pain than you, therefore you should suck it up. I think that that's a really sad response to your husband having a medical procedure that is painful and takes some time to heal from. The other part is clearly she is bitter, right? She's bitter and she's resentful. And the bitterness and resentment comes from either the fact that she had to do so much immediately after the baby was born, or the fact that she is the primary carer and she feels like she doesn't get any time for herself, she doesn't get any breaks, she doesn't get to sleep as much as she wants, or both of those. Like maybe even after the kid was born, she never quite managed to process that emotion of like, oh my God, why do I have to do so much and why isn't he helping me? That's how that comes across to me. And the fact that she lists all these things, she says all these things, but then at the end of it, man, it just comes out in this really spiteful little comments like, be happy that you didn't have to push out his head, with zero appreciation and no comfort and no compassion, no understanding. It's just sad. It's really sad. And she finds it, or she claims that she finds it funny, but I think that there's a certain element of a lack of self-awareness and a lack of self-reflection that comes through this as well. So this is quite unfortunate. It's also, I guess, the part where she says he's really been milking it, as if he's going out of his way to act as if he's in pain so that he gets something out of it. I kind of get the idea, the concept of man flu. I can't relate to it because my husband is not like that at all. If he's sick, he's really sick. And actually, under most circumstances, he's way sicker than he acts that he is. And that makes it worse in many ways because then it's hard to tell exactly how sick he is. But yes, the image of the stoic man who suffers in silence, I understand why that's more attractive to women. That said, if your husband is really in pain, it's okay. It's okay to just be nice to him for a couple of days. It's not a big deal. That's how I read this. I'll show you some of the comments and the responses that she got, and then we can see how she updated her reading of the situation. The very first person said, people only do what you allow, which implies that he's only pretending that he's in pain because you're allowing him to pretend that he's in pain. So clearly you're not bitchy enough in response, which is a really sad statement. Like I don't even know how you could say that. Next one says, my husband is getting one after this baby and I dread how big of a baby he'll be. Granted, he knows that I won't baby him since I've required C-sections for all of our kids, 1 transfusion, 1 stroke test, heart monitoring, and more. And this is again one of those responses where I would say, yeah, of course, it sucks that you ever had to suffer as part of your pregnancy, as part of giving birth. Honestly, it would still suck. Like if someone replied here, yeah, I had cancer and the cancer treatments were really awful, so I'm not going to be sympathetic. I don't understand why it's a competition. I don't understand why you need to feel like, oh my God, I went through so much more, so you should be able to just suck it up and deal with it. Like, I don't get where that comes from. And I just don't have that feeling towards a person that I care about, that I live with, that I love, who is part of my family, who is the father of my children. It's a really not a good look for anyone. The next person says, can't he just be in pain? Why does it need to be a comparison? And one person replies to that saying, agreed, pain stems from the brain and everyone experiences it differently. OP, it sounds like you may be harboring feelings about him having a life outside of being a dad when you feel trapped at home. It's been 3 days. Let the dude heal and make him help out still. My husband had a vasectomy 12 weeks ago and still has scar tissue that is painful. Not saying it's worse than labor or postpartum recovery, but they get to have their experiences too. And that's exactly the point. It's completely fine to have an experience that is painful, that is separate, that takes time to heal, and to get some compassion at home for that. Like you don't have to be mean about it. You don't have to be spiteful about it. The next comment says, why does pain and pain management need to be a competition? It's also on the same side. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I think this story kind of encapsulates my point. She says, I agree with the previous posters. Your issue is being projected on his vasectomy, but it isn't his procedure. It's that you need a bit of time for yourself. My husband had a vasectomy when our daughter was like 2 weeks old, and we have 7 kids under 10 at home, which is an insane number of kids who are all very young. I'm in awe. My husband is not a wimpy, man-cold kind of guy, and he legit said it was pretty uncomfortable. At times he said it hurt worse than his hernia repair, which was severe and had to be surgically repaired. That with the bruising leads me to think that for a few days it really does hurt them. Not to mention, I think they go through a bit of an emotional adjustment, realizing all their healthy sperm will die and they won't be making babies anymore. It's not birthing a baby, but I don't think it's fair to say he shouldn't be uncomfortable or at least you didn't have a baby comments. That becomes very dismissive to any pain he's having and could easily make him feel like you're not a person he can complain to because it becomes a foot race over who has experienced worse pain. When he's feeling better, you do owe yourself a conversation with him where you express your resentment over your time at home and that you'd like to take a little time for yourself. It's okay that you need a break, but make the conversation about what it should be about, your needs, not how he shouldn't be down for the count or complain over a procedure that he's had recently. And that is exactly the point. In general, I think a lot of women have this assumption that men should be able to read what they need without them having to say anything because it's just so obvious, right? So if the house is messy, if the dishes aren't done, if laundry needs to be done, if the trash needs to be taken out, if I need time, if I've been spent the whole time with the kid and now I'm really tired and exhausted, your husband should just walk straight in, immediately see all of these things and just do them. And what is helpful to think about is that people just have completely different perspectives. Different things stand out to them. So some problems I just don't care about at all, that my husband takes care of without even telling me, and then I only find out later. Other problems, maybe I do that. Other times, both of us miss something that both of us would like to be fixed, and neither of us can be bothered dealing with it, and therefore both of us are to blame. All of these happen. But I think what often happens with women when they have this assumption of, hey, he should just know what I need, is you do get resentful. But ultimately, if you've never actually verbalized that as a need, if you've never sat down and said, hey, you know what? I've only been sleeping 4 hours a night for months now, and I just really need a good night's sleep, just one night or just a few days, whatever you can give me, or maybe we can figure it out that you do it regularly, then you know what? Under most circumstances, I think most husbands are actually pretty okay with helping out. I think the vast majority of decent husbands out there really care about helping their wives. And the problem is just that most wives have a really hard time asking for help. So communication will help you both. And maybe you'll be able to save your reactions, to save to get rid of that resentment before it comes out in your responses to him when he's in pain, because that is something that would make me quite bitter if I were her husband. She said after all of the responses that she got, I get it, he also has pain as well, not saying he doesn't, and those responding are correct. I am salty about how much rest he's gotten because I do want him to be comfortable, but upset that I didn't and don't get the same courtesy. These are also things I've complained to him about, but it doesn't get through. So this situation, I guess, does just set me off because of the difference in how we've helped each other and the comments made during these times. But in a joking way, for me, his have come across more angry. Thank you for pointing out the flaw and that me thinking this is kind of funny actually is just kind of about me being upset. So she did have some self-reflection there. I think the statement of, she said it in a joking way, whereas his have come across more angry. I would just challenge that a little bit because I think that there is this assumption that, hey, if I say something that sounds a little bit mean in writing, then it's very clear that it's like, it was just a joke. Why doesn't he just take it as that? Whereas obviously if the other partner says something else, that from my perspective, it's like, oh my God, how dare you say that to me? In general, people read comments and they come across in different ways. And when they are motivated by the sense of resentment behind that comment, then people do notice, and it does come across in the communication as well. So it's not that it comes across as a joke and then it sounds like a joke and the other person responds with anger unfairly. It really is just that you're resentful and you're lashing out. That's how I read this situation. But dear OP, just have some better conversations with your husband. Maybe I mean, I know she says that it doesn't get through. I don't know how you approach those conversations. In general, I think a lot of conversations don't get through when you approach them from a place of anger or a place of frustration or a place of resentment, and or you kind of want to dictate and control exactly what the fix and what the solution should look like. Whatever you can do to try to approach problems from a perspective of, hey, we this is a problem for me and I would really love help trying to fix it. I don't know what would work for you. I don't know what ideas you might have, but then that you work on it together. That's probably a good life choice. Our next thread is a bit of a long one. She says, I'm 16 weeks, found out at 9 weeks, and things have been interesting. Baby daddy and I have lived together for 2.5 years now with his kids, who is one 14-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl, and my 8-year-old girl. We were trying to have a baby, and when I found out I was pregnant, I was excited, and he basically said I got what I wanted. Every conversation he wanted to have was about the baby being an added expense. I wasn't working for a bit and finally got a job making 120K a year, so I really didn't see the big deal. I wanted him to share his excitement, but that didn't really happen. I felt like a burden, and that this wasn't something he wanted and only what I wanted. We've been having issues with his 17-year-old daughter where she runs away from home, is extremely disrespectful, and basically cuts school and does what she wants. Our most recent issue happened a few days ago where she came to us laughing that she was positive for COVID. The kids don't know that I'm pregnant, so we started preparing for isolation. I made some remarks about her being nasty because she doesn't clean, she wears outside clothes in bed, jackets on public transport on the bed, and so on. He got upset and we got into an argument. Later in the night, when things calmed down, I went to speak with him and basically said that his 17-year-old was the root of 70% of our arguments, and that I was tired of constantly living on what feels like a battlefield. He got into how it was also my fault that the home environment felt the way that it did because of my lack of self-control. Brackets, very true, but I've tried to work with the 17-year-old on fixing issues and she's made no attempt to do the same. She ran away New Year's Day while we were asleep and came back 2 days later. That was the third time. He told me he was working on getting her out of the house to go live with her mum or aunt, and he needed 2 weeks. Her behavior disrupts our household consistently and is impacting our other kids. He basically told me then that she wasn't going anywhere, and I essentially needed to find a way to deal. The next day, I left for my 16-week appointment, and while there, I inquired about a termination. I don't want to raise a baby in this environment, nor do I want to be stuck there dealing with that. I already suffer from depression. I called him to speak with him about my thought, and he wanted to keep the baby only if we were staying together. I don't want to terminate and want to raise the baby on my own, but he doesn't want that. Do I terminate and move on? No trauma for my kid later in life? Or do I have my baby and never tell him? I'm so lost. Opinions welcome. My termination is scheduled for whatever date because I don't want to have the baby and not involve him, but I also want to keep my baby. There is absolutely so much horrendously wrong with this thread. I'm going to take the very first part of it where she says, we've been trying to have a baby, and when I was pregnant, I was really excited, but he said, hey, you got what you wanted. It takes two people to make a baby. I don't actually understand, especially considering you have kids and you have, pretty grown kids. So as a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old, like that's a lot of kids in your house. To not be able to sit down and have a serious adult conversation about having a baby and the type of environment that you're bringing a baby into and to what extent, like that both of you are on board with having this baby kind of blows my mind. That she says, hey, every conversation he wanted to have was about the baby being an added expense. Also blows my mind. I don't quite understand how you could be living together in this setup with these children and trying actively to get pregnant without being on the same page about your finances, because that's a really big deal. So maybe on some level you should do that. I think her argument of, hey, now I'm earning money and so it's not a big deal. I don't know what the background is here. In general, I guess a lot of people would assume that there is a certain amount of time that you're not working when you're going to have a child. To what extent will you be able to get the same position or have the same position or preserve that position as you have a child? Like, it doesn't seem to me that you guys ever sat down and properly thought it through, like properly talked about having a child, what that would mean for your relationship, what that would mean for your household, what types of relationships you want her to have with the other kids in the house, and so on. So that is already a huge red flag in this comment of, I felt like a burden and that this wasn't something that he wanted. Again, I don't know what types of conversations you had. I don't know why he agreed with you to try to have a child if it's not something that he wants, but there's clearly a lot going on here that isn't great. And then the entire point with the 17-year-old is a whole separate part of the problems that you're having. So she says, hey, the 17-year-old runs away from home, is extremely disrespectful, basically cuts school and does what she wants. That sounds to me like a troubled teenager. That sounds to me like there's something going on with the teenager that she's not, she's not in a good place. In the majority of cases, when teenagers act like this, that they have some problems at home. And I don't know what happened to his previous wife, girlfriend, partner, to the mother of the 17-year-old. I don't know how involved she is in her life. It sounds like she's still pretty involved because it seems to he has the option of getting her out of the house so that she can live with her mom. So it seems that she still kind of exists, but it's very clear that there's something going on with the 17-year-old. And instead of having some kind of compassion towards her, instead of trying to understand what's going on, like, kids don't run away from home on New Year's Day, and they don't do it 3 times if they're completely fine and happy and there's nothing going on. So the fact that there's zero compassion here kind of is really sad. And I can totally get his perspective of saying, hey, that's my kid. You're not going to just kick my kid out of my house. It's really unfortunate. And then when she says, I made some remarks about her being nasty, I don't know who talks to someone about their child that way. Like, if this is a healthy stepmom, stepdaughter kind of relationship, you wouldn't talk about her that way in general, but clearly it isn't a healthy relationship. And then, of course, he gets upset. If you come up to a guy and you're like, hey, your daughter is nasty, like, of course he's going to get upset. So yes, you got into an argument. And then, you have sometimes these little lines, these little nuggets where you can tell exactly what's going on and you can tell who's the problem here. This, when she says, the 17-year-old is the root of our arguments. And I'm tired of constantly living in what feels like a battlefield. And then he says, she is to blame because of her lack of self-control. And she admits that's very true. But I've tried to fix it, and the 17-year-old hasn't. I, the adult, has tried to fix it, and the 17-year-old is being immature and acting like a 17-year-old, so she clearly has not. So clearly here, the stepmom, stepdaughter relationship is failing majorly. They have a 17-year-old who's really, really struggling with some things, and they don't seem to be capable either together or separately to handle those issues and understand what's, like, where they're coming from or how they could support her or how they could help her out to try and give her a happier, more stable, better home to live in. So that's one set of issues. And then the final set of issues is how she wants to solve the quote unquote problem of her pregnancy is by terminating the pregnancy. So instead of trying to fix the problems that she has at home, instead of trying to fix the relationship that she has with her with her partner, instead of trying to communicate better on all levels and just be a better human being in general, she's like, hey, I should terminate the pregnancy instead. And she's currently 16 weeks pregnant. I didn't compare the dates, but presumably then that would mean that she would terminate the pregnancy at like 4 to 5 months pregnant, because she can't deal with these problems. And that's just also, as a solution, is so messed up that I have no words for it. I have no words for it. If instead of going like, I don't understand how you experience this, and instead of going, hey, maybe we can work on this 17-year-old thing, it's been causing a lot of stress for everyone, it's impacting the other kids, how can we really help her. Maybe she needs a counselor, maybe she needs therapy, maybe we need other support from professionals. Like, what can we do to try and get her in a better place so that all of us can be a little bit calmer and breathe easier? Instead of having any of that, she's just like, how can I get rid of the baby? And then she wants to get rid of the baby, or she wants to have the baby and keep it a secret, which is so bad. So generally speaking, this thread is, to me, written by a terrible, 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 terrible person. And I find it utterly depressing. I'm sad for the 17-year-old. I'm sad for the other kids that live in this house. And I'm sad for the baby that now exists. And I hope she does not decide to terminate, because none of the reasons here make any sense. I'll skip to some of the comments. One person says, 17-year-old could be out of the house soon, right? She obviously already thinks she's grown, so she needs to prepare to move out at 18 after high school. Your last sentence says that you want to keep your baby, and figure out the rest. I mean, yes, if you want to keep your child, you should 100% keep your child, because that will end in so much regret and so much sadness and so much grief that is really unnecessary. You can see here the comments. Let me just confirm. This is from OP. She says she turned 17 in October, so it would be another year. I'm so stressed as is. I barely get 4 hours of sleep per night. I imagine that won't be good, adding a baby to that and potentially falling into postpartum depression. Thank you very much for your opinion. And she also says, honestly, I feel you 100%. I'd never disrespect my mom or stepdad. This is OP. We're besties, and a big part of that is being respectful. But she's ungrateful, and I'm sure she has mom issues because her mom's not present, and we've tried to address them. But she's now in touch with her mom and speaks poorly of both dad and me while with her mother. While her mother is convincing her that no school is okay. So it's really a fight, and he's not responding to any of it. Everything slides. And so you can clearly tell that the kid is struggling. The kid is having a hard time. The mother is probably toxic in some kind of way. Maybe she's dealing with some abandonment issues because she was abandoned as a child, and it took a long time for her mother to be involved in her life. Like, it's so sad. I can't imagine having so much anger towards a child who's having a hard time. And this one, when she says, but she's ungrateful, nothing in the statement, nothing in the thread and how she described it shows any reason for the 17-year-old to be grateful, because they're clearly not looking after her to the best of their ability. And here someone picks up on that point that I said as well. I'm curious about the home environment felt the way that it did because of my lack of self-control. She's like, what does this mean? My advice is dependent on what exactly you're doing to add to the toxicity, which you clearly admit to. And then she says, so whenever she'd get rude, again, OP is the person replying here, I get right back in her face. I'm not big on letting stuff slide, so I end up saying something that I don't mean, but her dad believes that I don't make an active effort to bond. And when I moved in, I tried to have family game nights, date nights, and each kid had their own parent-kid date, but everything I did was met with negativity and no one wanted to, especially the daughter. And that would inspire her brother to not want to, but my kid would love it. So what was I supposed to do? Be talked down to by the child I'm taking care of? One of the things that I hate the most about specific types of parents is the parents that feel like they are entitled to respect without doing anything to earn it. So yes, maybe she tried a couple of times, like who knows? Who knows how it came across? Who knows how she did it? She tried to spend some time with the kids. Clearly, it sounds to me, I mean, if I were moving into a house with already 2 teenage kids, then I would assume it's going to take a long time for me to build up some kind of relationship with them. I would assume that both of them will also have some fear or anger or resentment at the idea of me trying to replace their mother in the house. And all of these things will take lots and lots and lots of time to work through. That's how I would approach it. She clearly did not. This idea of, oh, hey, I tried a couple of things and it didn't work out, and so now why would I let her talk down to me? Well, clearly you haven't done anything to earn her respect. Clearly you haven't tried to build any kind of meaningful relationship with her. Of course she's going to be angry at you. And then when you want to interact with her, or when you have thoughts about her, when you talk about her to other people, including her dad, you say things like, well, she's nasty. That says a lot about you as a person. This person replies, the person who asked about that replies, I feel sorry for your stepdaughter. I don't see your relationship improving. She's a kid and she won't make the first step considering she most likely has abandonment issues and you continue to reject her. And you're too immature to see the whole picture and humble yourself enough to see you can help forge peace here. I don't think your relationship with your husband will last unless you grow up, but you're too full of yourself to do it. You can react to children without stooping down to their level. You claim you get in her face right back. Have you ever thought about communicating like an adult and modeling behavior instead of power struggling with a child? You're a joke. Emotionally blackmailing your husband to have an abortion? Grow up. And everyone, at least one person really gets into her for this. She says, wow, you sound like a pleasant human being. I not how I would express myself, but honestly, she's right. She's right. She is completely right. And then the next person says, she is his child. Good on him for defending his child. Don't call your stepchildren nasty if you want your relationship to work. It doesn't matter if it's justifiable or not. She's a child. And then one person says, she's not a child. She's a young adult, soon to be legally an adult. She's 17, not 7, and regardless of her age, OP should definitely call her out on her poor behavior. Just because it isn't her biological daughter doesn't mean she should sit by and watch her stepdaughter's horrific behavior destroy the family. Now, we haven't actually gotten much of an idea of what the stepdaughter's horrific behavior is in terms of destroying the family or what it is she's doing. If she's just running away from home, then I wouldn't say that that's destroying the family. I'd say that that's a clear sign for help. And wanting attention. And then OP replies to this comment of, hey, it's not okay to call your stepchildren nasty. She says, a spade is a spade. 3 days without showering is nasty. If my biological kid did that and she's nasty. Maybe you should carry on. You clearly have some issue with stepkid relations and can't see beyond that. So as you can tell, the level of humility and the level of self-reflection and the level of wanting to actually fix the problem that this person has is basically non-existent. But it really boggles the mind. It really boggles the mind how some people end up in this kind of spiral. And despite the fact that she's obviously struggling, she's unhappy with her life. She says that she's struggling with depression. She's super angry about so many things. She does not seem to have to be in the right mental headspace to try and fix any of them. I don't know how I would deal with this situation. I think I would just get the hell out and I would be as far away from these people as possible. I feel, out of everyone here, I feel the most sorry for the baby and then the second most sorry for the 17-year-old who deserves better from her parents than she's getting. The next thread is, cousin just named their child a similar name to mine. On a much, much lighter note, she says, my husband and my cousin just happen to have the same name, Andy. My husband and I decided back when we found out the gender that we would name our child Theo. My cousin's wife just had their child a few days ago, and they decided to name their child Theodore. We never discussed it with each other, and we both never posted it on any forms of social media whatsoever. So now we could very possibly have 2 Andys with sons named Theo/Theodore born within 2 months of each other. Should I just name our child a different name with only 5 weeks left of my pregnancy, or just go with the name we originally decided on? I would this is me personally, I would probably just go with the name that I wanted, depending on how much I actually liked the name and depending on whether I had a short list of other names that I liked equally as much. But that's just personal preference. What I find really interesting about all of these is this idea that, hey, if I name my kid X, that should be a unique name that no one else has. At the very least, no one else in our vicinity has. And I kind of get it because you don't want confusion and so on. But I don't really get it that much. I don't think it's bad to have kids who are called the same name within the same space. A lot of people will go into, we'll read some of the comments in a second, but people will go into, hey, how much time do you actually spend with those people? Because maybe you're never even going to be aware of it. But honestly, I don't think that kids care very much if someone else shares the same name. I think so long as you find a way to make it clear when you're referring to one child versus the other child, then it's not a big deal. The amount, the desire or the question, I guess, should we name our child something else? with only 5 weeks left of my pregnancy. It sounds to me like OP does not want to pick a different name. And so just don't pick a different name. It's not a big deal. I can totally imagine a situation where the cousin and his family get then annoyed, like if their kid is born and they call him Theo, that they are like, hey, how dare you copy our name? And the answer is no one owns a name. You can use whatever name you want. It's fine. It's fine. Not to say that if you actually went out of your way to copy someone, it's not a little bit of a bitchy move, but it's fine. It's not a big deal. If you genuinely like the name and you genuinely want to use it for your kids, just go ahead with it. One person says, I would think about how much it may bother you that they're named the same. Would it matter long term if they have the same name? I.e., do you all spend a lot of time together, live near each other, etc.? I have the same name as my second cousin on my dad's side, and it never came up much in my life. It just didn't matter. OP says, I think I'm most upset because I don't want the boys compared to each other because they have the same name and are born around the same time. Also, my family is just straight evil, and they'll say something snotty every time there's a family gathering that I named mine something similar after finding out what my cousin named his child, since mine will be born a month later. Now, that sounds to me like there's a lot more going on, and it's not really about the name. The name is just that. It's kind of the superficial, shallow level where that comes up and you see the conflict. In general, when it comes to the boys being compared to each other, they will be compared to each other. Just having boys at the same time in the same family will result in them being compared to each other no matter what you do, irrespective of what names they have. Like the name thing is not going to play a role here. So they will be compared to each other. If you want to change that, then this is a conversation that you can go into whenever you notice it happening, whenever you see it, you can respond to it. So if someone says, hey, your kid Theo is so much smaller than Theodore, and Theodore is able to walk at this many months and your kid isn't, and so on, then it's completely fine to have a couple of phrases like, every kid is different, every child is unique, they all develop at their own paces, and there's nothing wrong with that, and they focus on different skills at different times. You can have all of these conversations. It's not a big deal. You can also just let it roll straight off your back. And when it comes to your kid, you can be very intentional and very careful about how you talk to him when if he's ever compared to other people, that he understands that he is his own person, that he understands there's no competition between him and his cousins or his second cousin or whatever. This is all relational. That can be fixed if you want to call it that. That can be fixed on the relational level. The next part is my family is just straight evil, and they'll say something snotty every time there's a family gathering that I named mine something similar after finding out what my cousin named his child. That sounds like its own problem. It sounds like maybe communication in your family is not great. Maybe you should be distancing yourself a little bit from it. Maybe you should learn to shut down conversations a lot faster if people accuse you of things. I would personally say if you want to call your kid X, you should just call your kid that. And if anyone doesn't like it, that's not your problem. If anyone thinks you copied it from someone else, it's not your problem. I would only care about, like, if you're friends with the cousin, then I would talk to him about it in advance just so he knows, and you clear the air that he doesn't think you're trying to take something away from him or from his wife. But that's literally it. Otherwise, just there's no reason to buy into the drama of it and create more of it yourself. That's my opinion. I know it takes a lot of self-confidence, and I know it takes the kind of character and the kind of personality that says, I don't really care if my family is annoyed at me. I don't care if they make snotty comments about me. I know that is not the case for a lot of people. So if it's something that you would rather avoid, then fair enough, go ahead and change the name. But if you don't want to, it's your life, your kid. You can decide what you want. Our final thread of the day is titled, Anyone else not taking belly pics or maternity pics? She says, I am currently 28 weeks and this is my first child. I have very little photos of me and my belly, especially with my significant other. It's not that I don't want to, I just feel meh about it. It's hard seeing other women post pictures portraying an emotion that I'm just not relating to. And the photos I do have feel like I'm forcing myself just a little. So I don't regret not documenting. Is that bad? I find this such a funny question because the desire to have external validation of a thing that you don't want to do anyway is a little bit strange. If you don't want to take pictures of yourself, don't take pictures of yourself. If you think you might regret it later on, then I guess go ahead and force yourself to take pictures of yourself. But you can just imagine, in general, these types of things like a maternity shoot, or if you invest a lot of time in taking family pictures in general, do you ever feel like you sit down and you scroll through them and you look at them and you have this like nostalgic reminiscing little period where you're like, oh man, that was such a great time, and look, my belly was so big then? If you don't do that and you don't see yourself doing that, then you're not losing anything, and then it doesn't matter what other people do. I think it's so strange, like just the sheer amount of comparison to other people and their decisions and their way of life and trying to live the same, or the desire to fit in to the circle of people that you surround yourself with, whether online or in real life, is a little bit sad. Just have a little bit more confidence in yourself and in your decisions. And if you decide not to take pictures, then nothing's going to end. Maybe at some point when you're in your 50s or 60s or 70s, you'll be like, it would be nice if I had just one picture of that time of my life. But maybe you won't. Maybe that thought will just never come into your head. And whether you think it or not, it's not a big deal. Like, this is not the kind of lifelong regret that you will never be able to move beyond. So it doesn't matter. And you'll see the comments, no, I feel the same way. Next person says, I did do a photo shoot, but haven't posted anything. Just documented it at least once because I don't know if I'll have any more babies. One person says, I'll take some photos for posterity, but I think I'll skip the big maternity photo shoots. Honestly, I didn't even know that maternity photo shoots were a thing until I got pregnant and saw people talking about it online. I'm not sure that people did or do it very much outside of the realm of social media. I think a lot of the pictures that people are really obsessed with taking are all about publishing things on social media. So that's just my assumption. One person says, which I think is kind of nice, I'll probably do maternity pics when I'm mega big, but I haven't intentionally done any in my first 15 weeks of pregnancy. For me, I just don't see the point. There are plenty of photos of me pre-pregnancy, so my kids will be able to check those out and be all, oh my God, look how young or fit mom was. Then, of course, I will want a few that showcase the ridiculous feat of pregnancy with the giant belly. But I can't imagine myself or my child ever wondering, oh, so how did mom look halfway through pregnancy? Pregnancy documentation is a before-after type thing for me. So yes, for some people that might be why you take pictures, and again, that's fair enough. For other people, maybe you take 0 pictures, and for yet other people, maybe you take a picture every day because that's just the kind of person you are. There is a certain amount of variation that is completely normal and natural for all people. And the deep, deep, deep desire to compare yourself to other people is not a good one. So just don't do it. When you sit there and you have this urge of like, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. Honestly, just do what feels right to you, and that will serve you well. Thank you all so much for listening today. See you next time.